You can still see some of the aluminum is right there, still in the threads. It's time to replace it. What? Are you kidding me? What's up everybody, Kyle from TTO Parts here. Welcome back to another video. Today we have a customer's Videojet 6530 here. This is a 107mm printer. Now they sent this in with a list of problems. Most important problem they were dealing with revolved around this little idler pulley. Now this pulley is actually supposed to go here, but he's kind of missing. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. We've seen this problem quite a few times. It's not just the 107mm printers that get this, it's both the 53 and the 107s with this new 6530 design. And that's because this design, die-cast design with a very, very thin section here for threads. Now, once this section has been stripped, what can we do? Well, I've reached out to the vendor and unfortunately, they don't have a great solution. And believe it or not, the very first time this happened, we had to tell the customer, you can use all the other parts on here for spares, but we can't fix this printer because it can't get you a brand new plate. Let that sink in for a second. We told them a brand new $10,000 unit because of a stripped out idler pulley section. Now, these usually don't strip. It's this cheap die-cast aluminum that has about like 3mm of thread that strips. And because of that, well, it's time to replace it. What? Are you kidding me? Had to brainstorm on fixing this. And I mean, you come up with a few things, right? This is a 3mm thread here. There's, like I said, about 3mm of engagement. So what can we do? Can we try to get an insert in there? Well, there's really not enough material to get one in there. So that kind of is ruled out. All right, well, can we drill it out, tap it to a larger size? Yes, but we go to an M4, you're looking at a larger pitch. So now you have less thread engagement on that deeper pitch. So we're gonna take this thing apart so I can show you another problem with trying to go, the easiest solution would be, all right, we have a 3mm thread. Let's just make this longer, put a nut behind it. Can't do that. Let me show you why. Go ahead and start taking this thing apart. We've got to get basically all the components off. I want to take the board off and show you what's going on the back side of this. Now, while I do that, we'll talk about that first case. I begged and I pleaded with the vendor, with the OEM. I said, how can you make us do this to a customer? This printer, believe it or not, that printer was only 4 months old. So this printer's 4 months old and you're gonna tell these guys they can't use it anymore? I mean, isn't this under warranty? What's going on? And with all of that begging and pleading, getting on my knees, I didn't do that, but just asking over and over. And I even had several phone calls and said, hey, put yourself in these guys' shoes. I mean, how would you feel? Would you ever buy one of your units again? No, I wouldn't. It's a bad design. Let's face it, it's a bad design. I spent a previous life, we'll call it, as a product design engineer, and we would go through, we would have quality control and manufacturing sit through our design meetings, and they would bring up, I mean, just sometimes the stupidest things. I was designing a junction box pool transformer. It was made out of polycarbonate, and it had to pass, the dumbest test. It had to be submerged and had to pass that and blah, 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 blah. But anyways, all right, so that was the 2.5mm Allen key that we used to get all this stuff off. Now we've got a 7mm socket to take these nuts off. So back to my story. At one point in these design reviews, I remember my project manager just losing his patience basically, because basically one of the guys had said, well, what happens if somebody takes a sledgehammer to it? What do you think happens? I mean, I can't make it bulletproof, but as I've gotten older and gotten to see bad designs in certain things, you realize how important those meetings actually were. I wish this part of the design would have gotten a little bit more critique than it did. because it is rough. So, got the board off. Let's flip this around so you can see it. Now, this is where my thumb right here, that's where our stripped out threads are. And look at what's right behind there. One of our motors. We can't go through that because of the motor. And we can't really put an insert in there because, well, there's just not enough engagement there. The larger we go in screw size, the worse off we are. We can't go any smaller because it just fly right through. So that's when we said, all right, why don't we do this? Take this motor off. We got a plate here. We just have a through hole. Let's countersink that through hole for an M3 screw. Instead of having external threads on this, we're gonna make that a tapped hole. So we're gonna assemble this differently, right? Instead of putting the idler pulley shaft on, there's a little wrench flat on here. Instead of doing that, we're gonna hold that idler pulley flush to this hole, come back on the back side with a little countersunk screw and be good. And guess what? We've done that, done it 5 times. This will be the 6th. And we've had nothing but success. So if this problem's been happening to you, we've got a solution. Don't worry about it. I'm curious if any of you guys with these Videojet printers out there have seen this problem yet, and what you guys did for a solution, or what the OEM told you, because we got the runaround. So drop a comment below. Let me know how you guys solved this. All right, so flip this bad boy around. The next step is we've got to get these motors out. That's the 3mm Allen key. We got 3 screws a piece. Make sure you keep these spring lock washers, because if you don't, this is a really good tip, because if you don't keep those, for say whatever reason, this rolls away when you're taking this apart, when you go to put this, put your motors back together, what'll end up happening is these screws are actually 1 millimeter too long without the split lock washers. And what that does is it makes, let me try to show you right there. So it makes the screw, if it's 1 millimeter too long, right where my finger is, that screw will protrude it will stick out past this faceplate, past the main plate, and then interfere with the carriage. Guess what you're gonna get then? I learned this one the hard way. If you do that, you're gonna get printhead carriage position error. And that is like, that's the error that just drives you nuts. I mean, we've got a whole video on that, on all the reasons why we've come up with that error, but this would go with number 1, basically obstruction, some type of obstruction impeding or preventing that carriage from moving properly. All right, we get this other motor off. And once we get these motors off, we can take this little gap out. So we're gonna do that, even though we can slide it out without it, because we're gonna be putting this in a nice little press. We'll just get everything out of the way. Then we grab our 4mm Allen and we start taking these 4 screws that are holding the whole carriage in place out. Yeah, it's not a particularly fun project, but I'm just glad we found a solution for our customers. And we're not charging an arm and a leg for this, so they can still use their expensive printers. Voila, carriage is out. Okay, pop these screws out. I'm using the same 7mm socket to take these hex standoffs off. There's a small set screw there that they thread onto. Just gonna leave that there for now. All right, and then we'll end up taking these posts off. We'll take this main plate off. That can be done with your 4mm Allen. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws up on top, holding him in place. And then we'll get these 2 ribbon motors out of the way. And once we do that, And we'll have this whole plate ready to go. All right, before we take that off, we're gonna go ahead and take this motor off. This is going back to our 3mm Allen keys. Okay. And then the last thing we have to do, take these bad boys off. This should be a 10mm wrench. There we go. 2. So now we have this plate. Now it is time to drill this out. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you feel informed. I hope that if you run into this problem, you won't hesitate. Give us a call at TTO Parts. We can help you through this. All you need is a custom shaft for this idler pulley and, you know, to countersink the back end of this plate. And we can do that for you. So don't hesitate, drop a comment, reach out, email us, whatever you gotta do. We'll catch you next time.